Hi, I'm Callie and welcome to Kapowski Reads and welcome to another library reading vlog. And for anybody wondering, yes, I did film a whole bunch of footage today with this dress and this giant chin spot. It's basically a paid actor at this point. I went to the library today to pick up my new books that I'm going to be reading in February, and I'm going to show you what the books I plan on reading are. Last month I only made it to 3 of them. This month I want to read all 4. I have got Small Country by Gail Fay. This is a novel about a child in Burundi in 1992. Yeah, 1992. It focuses on a time period where there was war and genocide, and it's gonna be an upsetting read and I'm gonna cry, and I know I'm gonna cry, and I have many tissues. It's not that long, but I think it's gonna just wreck me. I have Penance by Eliza Clark. This is about a death of a young girl being looked at 10 years later, and there's a lot of did that actually happen? A lot of questions over what was real and what was lies or made up or mistaken beliefs. I have Gliff by Ali Smith. This is going to be a buddy read with my Book Club Scotland friends. Not 100% sure of too much about this book because it's quite short, but I know it surrounds 2 children who come home one day to find that there is red paint around their house, and that historically has never meant good things. So I think this is also probably going to be a little bit emotional. I've chosen unwisely. And the last book that I'm hoping to read is The Angel Makers by Patty McCracken. This is a non-fiction book about a group of wives who formed a poison ring. And I feel that knowing that they're wives kind of there's an implication there that makes me think that this might not be easy reading as well. I don't know if I've made good choices. We'll find out. I have finished reading Gliff by Ali Smith. I read this as a buddy read. So I read it over a longer span of time than I wanted to. I wanted to just eat this book up. It was pretty short, so I could have, but it was a read-along or readathon. I never really remember whether it's read-along, readathon. I was reading it with some pals and we were reading set chapters on set days, so I didn't want to read ahead and then not be able to talk about it, so I savoured this book and I had a great time. I'm not sure how much I can say about this book without giving spoilers, so I'm going to be very conscious of not spoiling this book because it was fantastic, and I think that it's a very important book to enjoy. This book takes place in the not too distant future, which is somewhat dystopian. Almost, it feels kind of like the start of a dystopian novel when this book takes place. We focus mainly on 2 quite young children. Their mother is away. She's away working, so they are left with their mum's partner. And one day, a red circle appears around their home. Nobody really knows what this means and what's gonna happen, but the adult who's looking after them is like, we need to leave, we need to go. So off they go, and another red circle appears around where they're staying. So the adult who's looking after them is like, I need to go get your mum. I need to go get your mum, and we need to find safety. Again, we don't really know what this red circle means. So these children are left in a safe house, if you will, while he goes to get their mother, who's been looking after an unwell relative. And it is the story of these 2 children basically having to look after themselves, having to sort of stay out of sight, and also trying to find out what on earth these red circles mean. This somewhat dystopian, entry-level dystopian movie world features sort of insiders and outsiders, really. And we have people who are considered undesirable by the state for infringements that can be super, super small. And these children are kind of undocumented in this world. But they manage to sort of make a little home for themselves. They manage to find a horse. Wonderful, wonderful. Find a horse, or find a friend, and end up finding this community. And we have like a jump through time where we are in an even more dystopian reality. The children are sort of grown up, they're no longer together. And it was just sort of so interesting to see kind of through a child's eye. This isn't a children's book, but it had child main characters, and it was so interesting to see what that sort of sense of belonging feels like to a child. There was also a sort of undercurrent of right and wrong, of maybe things are not always so black and white. The book sort of challenged authority of, are those in charge actually capable of being in charge? Do they know what they're talking about? Are they making decisions for the right reasons to protect and help the right people? And it kind of challenged the reality that these characters were living in. The book ended in a way that I thought was like finite, sort of an ambiguous ending of like, well, what's going to happen next? I don't know what's going to happen. But there is another book. It's part of a series. The other book is also called Gliff, but spelled differently, and I just know I'm going to be reading that. I love Ali Smith books, but I find them so hard to describe because it's hard to sort of say what happened without telling you everything in the book. And I think that's why I like this author. You start her books going, oh, go girl, give us nothing. I know nothing. Like the seasonal quartet, like this collection here, I have my hair bobble on my finger. So like the seasonal quartet is the other series I've read by Ali Smith. And all I knew going into that series was just these books take place in the seasons. But I knew nothing else. And I ended up having a fantastic time with them. This author always writes books that include the concept of home and what it means to have a home and to feel like a place is your home, to feel like you belong and that you are safe and that you are welcome. And I think that especially in this current climate, that's such an important theme to have in a book. And I think that's why I love Ali Smith as a writer. She makes me think and she makes me feel, and she always entertains. I didn't know what to expect from this book because I didn't know much about what it was about other than child main characters and a red circle. We do find out what the red circles mean, and the moment where we find out what they mean was just really spectacular, and I really enjoyed the characters. Reading this book, I was so full of just fear of like, I hope these kids are fine because I like them and I want good things for them. And I had just the best time with this book. I know I always have a sort of better experience with a book when it is read as a sort of buddy read, but I know I would have loved this book even if it wasn't a buddy read. I actually kind of held off reading a couple of days so that I could just chomp through a whole bunch of chapters because the chapters were pretty short. And I just wanted to consume, like 50 pages at a time, which is the worst when you're doing a buddy read. You should stick to the assigned reading, but I read ahead. So my library books this time are off to a flying start because I gave this book 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me, but that's okay. 4-star is still an amazing book. A 5-star is just something I measure with my heart and sometimes cannot justify and won't. So I will go and read the rest of my books and I will come back. I will possibly be less shiny, but I make no guarantees. The lighting right now is whatever the lighting wants to be. I'll be back in a little bit with more updates, and hopefully the rest of my books end up being as enjoyable as this one was. I can but hope. I have an update. I also think my phone is upside down, so the camera that I normally look at is at the other side. So if I'm looking off to the distance, it's because I'm looking in the place I normally look and my phone is upside down. But I think you can tell from my face, I'm kind of tired. So we're going to go with that. I've also been rubbing my eye. I got glitter in my eye and we're going with it. We're just going with it. I have an update on 3 books. So I'm going to start with Penance. I actually had to take all of my books back to the library because they were due back. Such is the nature of a library. But with Penance, I was able to get an audiobook copy. My library doesn't have, I think it's Libby that a lot of people talk about. We've got something called Borrow Box, which is, I think, just the same concept. It's an electronic library. So I've managed to get my little mitts on an audiobook copy of Penance. So I'm halfway through the physical book and I will finish this book in audio format. And so it doesn't technically count as finishing a physical library book. So it won't count for this challenge I've set for myself. But I am going to include it in this vlog because it started in this vlog. So that's where it will finish. The next bit of video, which will be after this, will be my review of Penance. So far, I'm having a great time with it. It's very, it makes me feel a little unwell, but I'm having a good time with the book in that I want to keep reading it. Updates on the other books. As you know, Gliff is finished. Loved, finished. Sent back to the library with my fondest regards. The other 2 books that I returned, they got sent back with my regards, but I didn't finish them and I'm not planning to. So I'm DNFing those 2. And this is why I got 4 books out from the library. It felt too many, but sometimes I find it easier to DNF a book that I haven't paid for. So the books that I'm taking back, let's talk about my thoughts about what I did read. Small Country by Gael Faye. I don't know if this is a case of right book, wrong time, or just not something I'm interested in. I really wanted to read this book. It came to me with high recommendations, but I started reading it and instantly I thought, why on earth am I reading this book? The writing was, it was fine, but it was a book based on real life experiences of a traumatic event. I don't want to read that. I don't want to read that. And I know that's such a privileged, perspective to have. Not in a place emotionally right now where I could read it. So I chose not to and sent it back. And I think that's okay. The Angel Makers by Patty McCracken. I actually made it to just over halfway through this book. And it felt like a little bit of a slog for me. I really struggled to get into this book. I was so intrigued by it though. I really wanted to know more about the women, more about how they got away with basically poisoning a lot of people. And I just felt that this book almost kind of tricked me into reading historical fiction because this was nonfiction, but it was not nonfiction. It was a fictional tale of something that happened in real life. There were conversations that there's absolutely no way that you would know that they happened. And there was a lot of moments where characters of real people were doing certain things that there was no proof that they ever did those things, and it felt kind of harmful to it feels weird. It just feels weird when there's a book that has real events featuring real people who have passed away. They are no longer here to say whether that did or didn't happen. It just gave me a little bit of the ick. And it wasn't the factual deep dive that I was expecting. It was fiction, felt like fiction, and that's not what I wanted. I also really didn't like the writing style of this book. I found it very, very hard to get into. And I did check at the back, like maybe perhaps there were diaries that were found that detailed these, closed door experiences that how on earth would anybody know to put it in the book? But I found that the notes at the back were quite lacking in any sort of research that had gone on, and it felt like fiction, and I don't want my nonfiction to feel like fiction. I want my nonfiction to teach me something, be a learning experience, like through, entertainment. But obviously not every nonfiction book is going to be as entertaining as, watching The Traitors or something. Some of them are going to be quite hard and difficult topics. And I thought this was going to be a bit of a difficult topic because I can only, going into it, I could only assume the events that had led to these women being so desperate that they would poison people, because that sort of seemed like the acts of desperate people. But it didn't feel like that when I was reading it. So I just felt kind of disappointed. So I took that back. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to DNF it, give myself full permission to do so. So I'm kind of sad that two of my books are DNFs, but I've had a great time with one of them, and I'm gonna come back. Like literally, the next video clip will be me, probably without having glitter in my eye. Maybe, I don't know. I think that might be too grand a goal to have, but I'll be back in literally just a shimmy, and we'll tell you about Penance. But now I'm gonna go take my eye makeup off because I've got glitter in my eye. I have finally finished reading Penance. I actually decided I was going to read this book on little walks because I don't know, I've not been feeling audiobooks of late. So I thought if I went out on like little woodland walks, I could listen to the book and get some fresh air and some exercise, which is apparently good for you. And enjoy my book. I'm going to kind of move my phone because the lighting here is awful. There, is that better or is that worse? My pillows are a mess. They are what they are. You're not here to judge my pillows. But I mean, you can. They are a mess. I very lazily made my bed this morning. So Penance, I don't think I said what this book was about. It is about a violent, horrific crime that happened where three girls, teenage girls, took the life of one of their classmates in a very, very, very violent and horrific way. And an author has written a book, a non-fiction book, very key, about the events. However, right at the beginning of the book and in the blurb, so in the book description, we know that this author took some extreme liberties with the truth. In this book, the events in this book that are supposed to be factual are fiction. And I really enjoyed reading this book, trying to work out what the facts were that he hadn't manipulated. And I really enjoyed not knowing the truth. We know what happened to the girl and that we know how her life was taken, but we don't know for certain the things that led up to this, because the author's making stuff up. And I found it to be very ironic that what I loved about this book was what I hated about the non-fiction book that I DNF'd. And I think that's because in this book, I know it's not real. I know that the book itself that I'm reading is fiction. And I think that's the difference, because I don't like reading non-fiction that isn't factual. To say whether I liked any of the characters would be hard, because you don't get to really know them, because you don't know what's real. I think that's what's so clever about this book, is that you don't know. You don't know if you like any of them. And is it important that you like them when you know what they've done? I don't think it is. I don't know. There were little vignettes from true crime podcasts, true crime blogs, and it just felt like in this book a lot of those podcasts and blogs seem to just exploit the victim for views and listens and clicks. And I think that that was a very interesting and very kind of accurate response sometimes, because I used to listen to quite a lot of true crime podcasts, and I kind of went off them maybe like 5 years ago. I kind of started to go off of them because I listened to a few and they just felt like they weren't being respectful to the victims. And I know that that's not all true crime podcasts. Some of them I listen to still to this day, and I'm like, you're respectful to the victims, and that feels kind of right, and they're sort of factual, and I feel that there's a sort of level of respect there. I do still, of course, listen to drunk women solving crime, but a lot of their crimes are not, well, some of their crimes are quite violent, but they're mainly just interesting crimes, and they're historical, and people don't know what happened. The writing of this book, I knew I was going to enjoy this author, and I really liked the writing style. It felt very immersive, and that was kind of the other reason I chose to read this when I was doing little nature walks, because it was not a chirpy read. It wasn't a good time, fun time read. It was a good book. It was a very good book, but it didn't leave me feeling happy and glowy inside, such as the nature of the book, that I had to offset it with the possibility of seeing a squirrel. I did not see a squirrel, but I saw some swans, and I love a swan. I felt like the sort of Tumblr references felt really well researched and really kind of scarily accurate, and it sort of opened up the whole Pandora's box of like true crime fandoms being a thing. And it's one thing to have a passing interest in like crimes that have happened, and it's another to write fan fiction of people who have done horrific things. And I'm really enjoying books where they kind of look at how, like, would I count Tumblr as a social media? I think I would. I would. I really like books that look at how social media can be used, and not in a healthy way. I think it was fascinating. Really, I had a great time with this book. I really liked the ending. I hated the author, not the author of this book. I don't know her. I hated the fictional author of the non-fiction book that turned out to be a pile of lies. I hated him. And I didn't know it was a man. I didn't know it was a male author until I switched to the audiobook. I don't know why, I just assumed it was a female author who was writing this non-fiction deep dive. I think I don't know, maybe it's because the true crime podcasts I have dipped my toe into are all by women. I don't know. I think that's possibly my bias of when I think of what podcasts do I listen to, most of the podcasts I listen to are by women. And I just didn't think it would be, I didn't think it would be a guy. And then I was listening to the audiobook and it had a male voice and I was like, what? I think I must have just missed a little bit at the beginning and be like, it's a guy. The audiobook was actually really, really good. It had different voice actors for the different characters, which made it very, very easy to sort of keep track because it's an audiobook, so I didn't have the little formatting to let me know it was a new person, so I got to have a change in voice. Very, very good performance. I had a great time. I do think I'm gonna really love this author. I have another one of her books that I'm going to read, and I think she's gonna fit in just nicely with the other authors that I tend to sort of auto pick up. So I feel like I'm ending on a high. I'm gonna say that this library batch was a success. Yes, I had 2 DNFs, but I had 2 like really enjoyed books. I gave this 4 stars as well, so I think, I mean 2 4 stars and 2 DNFs, that's an overall rating of 4 stars. Or is it an overall rating of 2? I'm gonna go 4. Let's not count the DNFs. Let's only count books that are finished. Yeah. I already have my next books for my next library vlog, but I will talk about them in my next library vlog because I'm conscious this might be a long and rambly vlog. I got flu during this vlog. I don't think I mentioned that. I got the flu and then I got sick again. Flu, week of glorious health, week of being ill again. So I feel my vlogs of late have been a little bit scattered just because it's that season, germ season, which I think goes from January to December. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you've been reading lately. And if you use your library, let me know what the last book you got from the library was. Thank you so much for watching.